And if you're joining us, welcome, welcome. I am Denise Pope, and I am a senior lecturer at Stanford University Graduate School of Education and co-founder of Challenge Success. And I'll tell you more about that in a minute. Merv, you want to introduce yourself before we go on?
Sure. First of all, really great to be here. Thanks for having me, Denise, and the rest of the team. And welcome to everyone joining us today. My name is Merv Lapus. I'm the Vice President of Education Outreach and Engagement for Common Sense Media, Common Sense Education, depending on how you know us. My primary role essentially is working with a team that works really closely with schools and families to understand the needs around media and technology that are affecting their kids, their schools, their families, and providing free resources to build up educators to understand how to address these things in the classroom, provide resources for families, and even help inform policy to really make sure that we central our kids in the way that media and technology plays a role in their lives.
All right, thank you, thank you. Okay, Merv, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see the screen?
I see your screen. It looks great.
Okay, good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Balancing sleep and screens. The first thing, it would help if I could click on this, is by the end of this session, we hope that you understand the national trends around sleep for teens, understand the consequences of sleep deprivation and unhealthy screen habits, but probably most importantly, and the real reason why a lot of you are here, is to learn strategies to support healthy teen sleep hygiene and media use. So I'm going to start out with just a little bit about Challenge Success and why we're doing this, which is we are a nonprofit associated with Stanford. We partner with school communities to elevate student voice and implement research-based, equity-centered strategies to improve student well-being, belonging, and engagement. And that's sort of our trifecta. And one of the big pieces that we're looking at today has to do with the well-being piece around sleep, but we also know that that impacts some other areas that are really important to student success as well. Right now, we are in a pretty serious mental health crisis. We know from decades of research that too many students are struggling with their well-being, and they experience both a lack of belonging and a lack of engagement in school. But right now, we're seeing an alarming increase in the prevalence of certain mental health challenges. And some of you might be aware of the Center for Disease Control surveys and the US Surgeon General surveys, but right now, about 29% of students have experienced poor mental health in the last 30 days. And one of the things that we know absolutely is related to mental health is sleep. There are many, many other factors that we're not going to hit today that can affect mental health. Pick a cause. We've got the news of the day can be very stressful. We've got things that just talked about, the climate change, impact of climate change and political divisions. We've got, we're still kind of in this pandemic and numbers are increasing, and we've got all of the things that can happen in someone's life and family situations and trauma and poverty and you name it, right? But one of the things we do know that is also related to mental health is how much sleep and the quality of sleep that a teen is getting. So that's really where we're going to put our attention today. So this is how much, actually, you know what, before we do this, Kristen, I'm going to have you launch a poll and find out how much sleep teens are getting. So I would love for you to go ahead and answer this poll. And it's okay if you don't know. We know that a lot of kids go to sleep well after their parents go to bed, but go ahead and let us know about how much sleep your teens are getting. And we'll let those numbers come in. Just wait a little bit longer here. Okay, looks like they're slowing down. So let's go ahead and show the results. It looks like we've got a real mix here. We've got about 3% at 5 hours or less. We've got 12% at 6 hours, 36% at 7 hours, 45% between 8 and 10, and we have 3% they don't know. So let me go to this next slide here. This is how much sleep they actually need to get. So I was kind of happy to see that high percentage in that 8 to 10 range. If you are a toddler, 11 to 14, naps count. Same with preschoolers. Actually, naps count for everybody. Elementary school, which is up to about 13 years old, 9 to 11 hours is what you're aiming for. And if you're a teen, and that's really the focus today, 8 to 10 hours of sleep. And I think that our population who took the poll might be a little bit skewed, because this is how much sleep we see our students getting in our survey. And we've surveyed thousands of students, and this has been fairly consistent over time, that the goal, again, middle school, 13 years old and younger, you want between 9 and 11. They're getting about 7.8, well below what they need. And at high school, scary, 6.8 is our average, when they should be getting 9 to 11. Now, here's what we know. They're going to bed pretty late. And part of that is because when you're a teenager, you do have a different circadian rhythm. And so you get tired later than adults or younger children. And so your body naturally wants to stay up late. So this is, if you can look at this slide, you can see that there's a big chunk going to bed basically between 10:30 and 12:30. But then we've got kids, definitely a kind of scary chunk there, going to bed in the 1:30, 2 o'clock, 2:30 a.m. time period. What we know about teens is that they go to bed later, but they still need that amount of sleep. And some of the things that can impact that can be how early they have to get up to go to school, and school late start and school start times. So what we know about sleep deprivation is it is absolutely related to mental health issues. We've known for years that there's been a bivariate correlation between mental health and sleep. When you have anxiety, when you're depressed, when you're ruminating, it's harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. But we also know that severe sleep deprivation can actually trigger depression or anxiety. So this is not just, we want them to get more sleep so that they pay attention in school. There's some real serious consequences here. The mental health issues. It also affects your short and long-term memory, right? It's going to be harder for you to remember things on the test the next day. It's going to be harder in the long term to remember. We see bullying going up because your brain is not sending the message, I should not say these things to my friends, right? I should not just act on what the brain is saying. I am exhausted, and so I'm lashing out. We see weight gain. We see impaired performance and greater distraction. Many sports athletes are finding this out, right? Sleep is so critical for their performance. We're actually seeing more car accidents due to drowsy teenage driving than drunk teenage driving in the United States. And we're seeing a decreased immunity. So you're actually going to get sick more often, and it's going to take you longer to fight those things, to fight off the disease. So I want to talk a little bit about things that can disrupt sleep. I'm not going to steal Merv's thunder, screens. I'm going to let Merv talk all about light exposure and screens. But caffeine and stimulants taken too soon to try to go to sleep. Alcohol, obviously, we know makes you maybe at first drowsier, but then it impacts the quality of your sleep. Physical activity too close to bedtime has an effect on sleep. You're like so wound up after your hockey practice at 10 p.m. that it's really hard to get your body to go to sleep, especially as a teenager, knowing that you have that delayed onset. Stress, noisy conditions, overscheduling, staying up late doing homework, etc. Some of these things you as a family have control over. Some of these things you don't have control over. And we're going to talk about solutions in a minute. But I just want to show you another little piece of insight, that when you do get the right amount of sleep, the 8 to 10 hours as a teenager, we see improvement in mental health, vast improvement, far fewer car accidents, lower rates of substance use, fewer incidents of bullying, higher rates of school attendance and actually paying attention in school, which leads to better academic outcomes. So Lisa D'Amour several years ago was a speaker for us at a conference, and she said, if you knew that there was one magic bullet, one pill you could take that would make a huge difference on your life as a teenager, improve your health, improve your attention, improve how you do in school, make you less likely to misuse substances, etc., we would all pay lots of money to take it. Well, this is it. It's sleep. I want to just hit one more thing before I turn it over to Merv, and that is a little interesting piece of data that we did where we asked high school students, where do they keep their phone when they sleep? Now, there's 1% that said they don't have a smartphone, which is obviously highly unusual. But look at that, 85% of the students are keeping the phone in their room at night. And here's what we know. When your phone is in your room at night, whether it is underneath your pillow, next to you, in a backpack, whatever, it's going to affect your sleep, both the quality of your sleep and your ability to fall asleep. So the kids who keep their phone in their room at night are getting on average 6.7 hours of sleep, very similar to our average overall, when again, the goal is between 8 and 10. And look at the difference here. The kids who have the phone out of their room at night are getting 7.2. Now that is a significant difference. It's still not getting, to where they need to be. There's still other issues that have to be helped there, but we know that that is one solution. So before I turn it over to Merv, we're going to launch one more poll. Kristen, if you could just go ahead and launch that for us. Where does your teen keep their device when they're sleeping? In bed with them, on them, in the bedroom, not in the bed, outside? My teen doesn't have a device and I don't know. And we'll let everyone weigh in on that. Okay, that's starting to slow down. Maybe we'll go ahead and share those. And it looks like we've got a kind of a split here, right? We've got a chunk that's actually in bed or on the, we're thinking maybe a smartphone or something like that. In the bedroom, about 39%, outside the bedroom, about 40%, 7% doesn't have a device. That's higher than our 1% in our survey, but that was high school. We have a mix here. And 2%, I don't know. So with that, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and we're gonna let Merv take things from here.
All right, I'm muted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. So let me go ahead and just open up my screen for you all. And I'm very excited to kind of jump in at this point because it does allow me to reiterate some of the things that you shared, Denise, for sure, and go a little deeper into it. But I do want to talk about the topic of media, technology, and sleep broadly. We want to focus on teens, but we also want to recognize that as parents, caregivers, family members, we can help shape that as well through our own actions. And I'll touch a little bit on that through some of the research that we've done and that we also have coming down the pipeline. But just to kind of, set the stage a little bit, right? General overview, and this reinforces some of the things that we're talking about earlier, Denise. Well, one is just, we know that kids use their phones and media as a means to build their social relationships and community, right? So, growing up for me, I was out with my friends from middle school all the way through my teenage years, and we were outside. And I didn't have to come home until the street lights came on, right? And I knew that, that I was all good and I was getting my social time. And it is developmentally appropriate for our kids and our teens to be spending that kind of time together. And we know more and more that they're getting less and less of that. So they're spending more of their times in the places where their friends are. And that's going to be in these online spaces, these communities, or just online. So it's going to be almost impossible to extricate them from that reality. But we can help them find balance and make more healthy choices around that. We also know that teens are actually, in many ways, more they're more aware about the impact of tech on their sleep than we might give them credit for. The reality is we know that it's from the research that they know that they're having harder times. We know that that's affecting them, and they can feel it, especially when they get themselves together. We also know that we have to model healthy behaviors more. Our kids are looking to us, and so we need to help them kind of set these boundaries, even teens, but we also need to recognize our own. We also have to recognize that our battles over tech are often compounding the problem. So we need to understand and really just listen to what your teens, your kids need from you and from their phones. Why is it so vital to them? How are they using it? What are other solutions? Or, are they coming up with really thoughtful remedies? And that's what they're there for. but then how does that cross that point to where then it disrupts sleep? And also wanting to remember that making tech work better for kids and families, is a much bigger fight. Sleep is a very important part. We're talking about well-being. There's so much that parents can do, but we also know that there's other things that we need to be looking at, like policies, like platform design, and really making sure that we are advocating for all the different ways that we could be supporting our kids and families as we navigate healthy lives. And how does then, again, sleep kind of play into that? So what I want to focus on is really dive into some of the research that we did. And despite the recommendations that, kids need as much as 9 to 12 hours of sleep a night, the CDC and others report that only 75% of teens are already getting less than 7 hours of sleep a night. And we know that that devices are definitely playing a role in that. We know that the dangers and the challenges that sleep deprivation could lead to are pretty widespread. Denise mentioned some of them. But without enough sleep, kids can be more at risk for obesity or weight gain, poor academic performance, unsafe behaviors like smoking or drinking, and even depression. But it's not really an easy problem to solve per se. As kids get older, there's more homework, there's more extracurricular activities, there's more socializing outside of school and throughout the many platforms that I mentioned earlier. Plus, school starts pretty early in many regions. So, that's another reason they're up and out before they can even yawn from just being tired throughout the night. So to address this, we wanted to interview parents and kids. We interviewed 1,000 parents and their children across the country to really get a national sample around what this effect really looks like. And so this report's called The New Normal. It's Parents, Teens, Screens, and Sleep. And it came out in 2019, 2020, but the research and the findings still really hold true today. Some of the key takeaways for you all, just to kind of know, a whopping 69% of teens now take their mobile devices to bed, and 20% actually sleeping with them. So it's in the bed with them. I don't know how many teens are here, how many parents have had to deal with hearing a scream in the room because a phone has fallen on their face because they're sleeping and the phone's right in front of them and it just drops on their face. It's happened to parents, it's happened to teens and kids of all ages, but they're also wearing them with smart devices like smartwatches and so forth. So it's following them to bed in many ways. And during that time, many of them are waking up in the middle of the night to check notifications, to check social media, whatever those things might be. If they get an alarm that's going off, or they've got a shoe drop that's coming out and you want to be awake for it, or you got some kind of text message or ping, those things are actively disrupting your sleep. And it happens 24 hours a day, especially with the amount of connections that we have in many ways, where we're being notified with friends and family and people that we met that are all across the world that are in different time frames. Those messages just continue to come through into your devices. The study also showed that for families, that tech devices are a near constant in everyday life, distracting parents and teens from each other more than ever, and especially disrupting sleep. The results raise concerns about the impacts at a time when research is showing that, again, we're not moving enough. School performance is poor, though it's starting to rise back again, but it inherently has become poor with more access and late access to this tech throughout the night, and even behavioral problems and related to inadequate sleep when we mentioned that earlier. One of the prevailing problems is that we actually don't listen to our own advice, right? We already know that screen time usually should stop at least an hour before you go to bed, but we know that it's not. And again, I mentioned earlier, with 70% of teens and 61% of parents, they're checking their devices well within 30 minutes before falling asleep. So it's the last thing they see, and it's in many cases the first thing they see when they wake up. One of the things that we do is, we think about when we're working with educators or working with families in a classroom or just family groups, we typically have them kind of self-reflect and close their eyes, and then we walk them through a day in the life, right? And in that day in the life, we have them think about, all right, you're waking. What is the first thing you do? What's waking you up? Is it an alarm clock, or is it your phone, which is your alarm clock? Are you then listening to music? Are you checking your text messages? What are you doing next? Are you brushing your teeth and listening to Spotify? So we know that we're using a lot of that screen time throughout the day. And it goes all the way up to, what's the last thing you do before you go to bed? Oh, I just check my last messages before I go to bed to make sure I don't have anything waiting for me, right? That type of stimulation is either going to keep you awake, or it's going to give you more anxiety, because now you might feel like, oh, there's something I have to get back to, or there's something that I missed. the report goes on to really show that parents also now feel that they are spending too much time on their mobile devices. So parents that are here or caregivers that are here, it's important that you really take a look in the mirror per se and just recognize that we're spending a lot of time on our own devices. And that report has gone up. When we first did this research in 2016, we felt that it was kids that were, parents felt their kids were spending too much time. And now parents are saying, you know what, I actually think I'm spending too much time on my device. And kids feel like they're spending less time now. I think one of the realities, however, is that what they're defining as time and what they're doing on their device might be different from the time they're actually spending on it, because they're not necessarily defining listening to music as time on their device, or watching videos isn't the same as social media, right? And so the way that we define what we do on that device is informing some of the self-reporting. Other things, more kids actually wish their parents would get off their device. I think that's one of the things we hear the most, is that it's not just parents that are feeling like, oh, you know what, I actually spend a lot of time on it too, but kids and teens are pointing out that their parents are actually spending more time than they are, or oftentimes are setting rules around how much time they can spend, but their parents are oftentimes not following those same rules, right? So it's important to recognize that when we talk about sleep and the expectations of device and the role they play in getting prepared or not, we have to make sure that we're kind of walking the walk, right? Some good perspective news, though, in general, is that these types of conflicts over sleep and over devices and how much time you can use or not, it used to be probably one of the biggest kind of arguments that we heard from families, like always these major fights around the devices, especially before bed. So they're not as common now. But the reality being, maybe we've just gotten so used to having them in our rooms that we're not even thinking about raising them as issues. And the challenge with that comes is we know that they have real implications. The reality is they do affect us, right? So when it comes to screens, there are three main problems that we really want to really look at, outside from the number of kind of challenges or the drama that might follow us into the bedrooms. There are some real things, like just the way that the screens have this big blue light that's in your face. And that blue light is very similar to the sun telling you to wake up. So when you are waking up in the morning and the sun rays are coming through the screen, through the windows, it's telling your body it's time to get up, right? And when you have these blue screens or these really bright screens in your face, you're essentially telling yourself it's not time to go to bed, right? It makes it harder to go to sleep. Just using the device is also very stimulating, right? We know that it's so engaging. There's a lot of video content and then all of these other notifications. It's incredibly hard to wind down from that. So taking the time to really separate from any devices at least an hour before bed, right? And we know that these devices have invaded the bedroom. Someone mentioned earlier, oh, my device is in my room because it's my alarm clock. Well, alarm clocks are like $5, $6. Amazon, you can get them really cheaply now. So that shouldn't be an excuse anymore, that the device is your alarm clock. But we know that it's so easy to bring them in with us, especially when our homework's on there, our communication's on there, our calendar's on there. Our whole life is run off of our devices. And now essentially we keep them with us from our pocket to our bedside. And that's really making sleep incredibly challenging for everyone, but especially teens, where their strongest connections are to their friends, and their friends are on all of these devices. So we can then talk about kind of next steps and tips, but that's what a lot of the research has brought us to this point, and happy to discuss further with you around some of this work, but then also what do we think are good ways for others to maybe take a step forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Merv. So let's have Merv and I are going to just have a little discussion about some of the tips, and then I see there's been a bunch of questions, and we will hit those. But I think from a physical standpoint, I'll talk about sort of the non-screen solutions. There's something called sleep hygiene, and we know that it actually makes a difference. Certain things make a difference that will help a teenager fall asleep. One very simple thing that you can try is to have a consistent bedtime schedule. And this actually came up in the questions. The more consistently your body knows that this is the time it goes to sleep, even though you're a teenager with this different circadian rhythm, the better it's going to be for you, the easier it's going to be for you to fall asleep and get a good quality of sleep. So if you can have a consistent bedtime, and obviously this may change based on if you have a test the next day or what your extracurriculars are, but if you can try not to sign up for the hockey practice at 10 p.m. or something, right? To kind of have that consistent bedtime. And then what you're doing is about anywhere from an hour to 45 or 30 minutes before bed, you're actually trying to get into bedtime mode. So lowering the lights, actually in our house, we lower the lights. We like an hour before bedtime, that's what we're doing to help us get in the mode, right? We're not doing lots of physical activity. You're actually supposed to not work out physically past 6 or 7 p.m. at night, because it's, again, sending messages to your body to stay awake. I get it. I have athletes who are teens. It's really hard. You have no control over practice times. But then think about ways you might wind down before bed in that hour. It might be time to take a hot shower. It might be time to take a bath. It might be time to listen to music. It might be time to do yoga, meditation, or stretching. I can feel the eye rolls from the teens on this webinar, but there's a lot of really good research that you have to help your body get ready for sleep. You're not going to have a huge meal or lots of sugar right before bedtime, right? So you're basically sending the message that this is my consistent bedtime, this is my sleep hygiene, this is my wind down time before bed. And I'll let Merv talk about some of the sort of screen things that you can do before bed, but that consistency is pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say that I think what's really important to recognize is that when it comes to the screen side of things, they're not a big departure from these general recommendations that you're talking about, Denise, because so after school, oftentimes, I mean, if there are not other activities for our teens or our kids to get into, it's very easy for those activities to be very heavily screen based. And that because of the way that they're designed to keep you there. So they'll keep you there all the way up through bedtime. So then again, at that point where it's like, all right, it's time for bed. Now you've been consuming all the way up to that point. It is incredibly hard to kind of to wind down, right? So finding other ways or finding activities as you look at, like you mentioned, kind of setting a schedule or getting a sense of what does that potentially look like for each family. What are other activities that you all can engage with to break those things apart so it's not just continuous, but especially the hour or more before it's time to wind down, that those screens are all put away. And again, it's a lot easier for a team to be able to do that if we are doing that with them as parents, right? And it's so hard, especially like I'm working out of my home right now. It is so hard to disconnect my work from my device and just saying, well, me being on my device puts food on the table, it pays for our house. Totally get it, makes a ton of sense, but it doesn't feel the same when when for them they might be doing homework or they might be doing something that's a passion project that is part of their future and you're telling them no, turn it off. So where do we find some of those norms that we can really reinforce as families so that it doesn't just feel like we have different sets of rules when it comes to what screens mean to our sleep and how families wind down. Other things that we want to potentially even introduce, like you mentioned, yoga, meditation apps are really great. Yes, it's exposure. You're using a device, like I said, they use it for everything, but the way that you're using them, it's giving you a notification, to start your time for reflection or listening to something a little more calming, something that's a little more soothing versus some of the things that you might be engaging with it every day, right? Everyone's going to be a little different. So finding another way that you might be able to use them to maybe help introduce those calming sensations that will help you to get ready for bedtime.
Merv, I have a
gonna say
question for
something?
you. If you're using a meditation app before bed, does that mean you're falling asleep maybe with earbuds in your ears, or it's in the bedroom at night? Like how help me with that.
Yeah. So a lot of folks would typically use that as like, oh yeah, like I fall asleep to the TV, right? Or I fall asleep listening to podcasts. So what we're talking about is just being able to get your mind to calm down and focus. Be able to really focus on, all right, it's time to go to bed. I've cleared out my mind. Now it's time to relax and go to bed. And then that's when you actively get into your bedroom because you want to do this process outside of the bedroom oftentimes if possible because you want to leave your device outside of the bedroom as much as possible, right? It's just about getting you ready for sleep. And I know that from personal, like my own personal experience, when I don't do that, when I don't have that calm down, I have broken sleep. So I might have 6 hours of sleep or 7 hours of sleep, but I know I've woken up restless in the middle of that time, and I'm just not as effective that next day, right? And that's what can happen to you when your mind is racing. It starts to make use of that energy in the middle of your sleep, and that turns into, your body will, physically start to get restless, or you'll start to get really wicked dreams, just because your mind is not steady and calm. Someone mentioned earlier, if you just went grayscale and turned off the blue light and just kind of went into dark mode, it does relax your eyes a little bit more. It does to your eyes a little bit more, but it doesn't take away the kind of the pressure or the anxiety of the notification experience that you have when all those apps are actively running in the background and you're getting notifications from every potential platform that you might be following or news headline. There's always something breaking in the news, and it always finds its way onto one of your feeds. So even though the grayscale might help your eyes a little bit and kind of calm you down a little bit, it doesn't take away from that anxiety or that feeling of waiting for something to kind of ping you for the next, app to open.
Yeah. And just to sort of build on that, we have kids who wear blue light glasses for watching TV, blue light glasses for the last hour or so of homework. You still, as Merv said, you still want to have that break where you're really trying to put everything away. But we also live in the real world. I know how busy people are. Challenge Success has something called the Time Wheel, which is a tool, and Kristen can drop that link in the chat. It's actually to kind of be take a step back and be a little bit proactive about how busy your schedule is. Thanks, Kristen, for putting that in the chat. So what we ask is kids, adults, everyone can list how many hours of homework they have each day, how many hours of extracurriculars, commute time, shower time. We want them to have some free time. We want them to have some family time, right? And what you're basically looking at, we've crossed out 9 hours of sleep. So we're saying, as you sign up for classes next year, as you sign up for your extracurriculars, keep in mind that you cannot do it all and that there's only 24 hours in a day. And then we say to the adults, please don't sign off on a child's schedule that is clearly over 24 hours a day, right? And so that's one way of sort of how do we get ourselves out of this mess? Because, oh my gosh, we go from school to practice to homework, and we have all these, advanced placement or honors classes, or we have paid work, or we have family responsibilities that also have to get fit in before bedtime. We want to help you with that time wheel, be very proactive and having this conversation together. One other thing that I'm really proud of with Challenge Success is that the state of California has implemented a school late start rule, which they used our research from Challenge Success to help make that rule, noting that kids weren't getting enough sleep. And as Merv said, you have to get up really early to get up and out, right? Now in the state of California, as of last July, no middle school could start before 8 o'clock, and no public high school could start before 8:30. We're trying to get that to happen in other states across the US. And so if you happen to be someone who's into policy or advocacy, let us know. We'd love to help you kind of think about that. But the key is that with good education around sleep, kids are able to get the sleep they need. They're not just staying up later because school starts later, but you need to have that combination of education, kind of like what we're doing now, and the late start times.
Yeah, totally true. I'll add in another link here. I love the resource around the time wheel activity. If you're looking around family tech planners, very similarly, like taking it very specific around kind of the type of tech as well as when and the timeframes, you can use these tech planners as well. That could be a really helpful solution as you kind of plan out, where does this time all fit? I think, as we think about just other mentions when we were talking about kind of like the blue light and just kind of the anxiety feeling, that's what I'm looking for, notifications. I think one thing that we want to recognize, and these are part of the conversations that families should have, especially with teens. It's so easy for us because of the social connection that we have, and that we're always wanting to be connected to our friends, and we do that through all times of the night. We see that our teens doing that throughout all times of the night. they're getting stuck oftentimes in what we call these thinking traps, like because they're waiting for notifications or waiting for responses. They're wondering what's happening tomorrow. And these thinking traps essentially become kind of exaggerated or irrational, kind of negative thought patterns that lead us to believe things aren't necessarily true or happening. Or I hear from so many teens like, I just couldn't sleep. I was waiting for the response and I don't know if I said something wrong. So it's just going through my head. So, there are the two things. There is the tangible things we can do around keeping devices out, recognizing the irritation of that screen light on our bodies and our eyes and keeping us awake, and the notifications just auditorily are keeping us awake or keep waking us up. But then there is a real kind of anxiety or a natural feeling when things are happening at school or in our social spaces that are also keeping our kids up. So I say that, for parents to stay connected with your teens, and when they feel that there's a pressure or a stress or something's keeping them up, or it's just a response that they're waiting on, they're not sure. It's like recognizing that, they're oftentimes kind of adding this additional thinking trap in their head that's keeping them awake and keeps them kind of running in circles with solutions, even though the solution is we'll deal with it tomorrow, right? It's not going to go anywhere, right? And so finding ways to be able to deal with it that way, because I want to recognize that everyone's situation is a little different. And sometimes, it's not that we can it's not as simple as just taking the devices out and having them all charge in one place in the kitchen at night, right? Sometimes there are other aspects to it. And so I want to recognize that, especially in terms of how it can disrupt potential sleep and quality of sleep when you don't have that frame of mind where you're ready to rest.
Absolutely. And I think, right. So, like, what are the things that we can control, right? We can, or at least attempt to control, would be how busy the kid is, how much you're signing up for, right? Where is that common charging station happening? I know some people are saying, gosh, even if it's in the kitchen, my kid's sneaking in. Some people are putting it in the master bedroom bathroom, right? So that your kid won't sneak in and do that. Can you control the what your kid is doing right before bedtime and really have this conversation around winding down? The temperature of the bedroom, right? I know it's really hot right now in California, so that might be hard. But again, there's a temperature that we sleep better at, which is around 68 degrees. And it's really hard to sleep when it's 102 or whatever outside. So there's things that we can try and control. There's things that we have some control over. There's things that we may not be able to control, but talking about it with the teen and helping them recognize and helping them get the sleep education is going to go a long way. So I'm just looking at some of the questions. Some people are like, can we catch up can teens catch up on sleep on the weekend? So that's been a very common pattern, even when I was growing up, and I'm ancient at this point. The sleeping, it's called binging, right? So you'll stay up really, really late on Friday or Saturday nights. But then you're going to sleep till like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the afternoon on the weekends. And so what's not ideal is that it's really hard then to get back to that normal sleep schedule on Sunday when you've done that sort of binge sleeping on the weekends. It's not ideal. That said, every sort of teenager is going to want to stay out a little bit later on the weekends or stay up a little bit later on the weekends. Movies don't start till 10 p.m. sometime, right? Whatever. So have that conversation with your teen. If there's a differential about an hour or two between bedtime and awake time on a Saturday or Sunday morning, that's not going to shake the boat so much. But if it's really this very lopsided, they're staying up till 2 or 3 and they're not getting out of bed till 1 or 2, that is going to really be worse of a problem than during the week to try and get back to that sleep pattern. So as much as you can, consistency, while still allowing and understanding that teens are nocturnal and social lives have to happen.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've done with my teen, I've got a younger on the spectrum, I got a 13-year-old, but there are later nights that she has to spend on certain projects and things that she's working on now. And so what we plan then is, all right, that means you're going to have less sleep tonight. You're going to have to wake up on time. What break do you have tomorrow? So you can just take a quick cat nap, just like 30 minutes, so that you can take a rest, because tomorrow has to go on still too. You're going to have more again. So how do you just make sure it's not going to catch up, but if anything, it'll just give you a moment to kind of pause and just, not just have this feeling where you're just, on 10 for 24 hours, right? But take the moment and actually take a breather, take a break, get back into it, and then let's see where we can just kind of get you back into your sleep pattern. But we talk about these things every night, essentially. How are you feeling tonight? You ready? Okay, good. It's just a part of our conversation, so it doesn't feel like I'm only going to them when there's a problem. It's just a part of it. It's one of the things we talk about, right?
I think that's super helpful. And another question, which is along the same lines, is how to deal with kids going to bed after their parents. And a lot of that is because they have homework or they're studying for a test, or, like my husband goes to bed at 9, like my teenagers were not going to go to bed at 9 o'clock. Right. So I'll just tell you something that has worked in my house on certain times when that had happened, is to say, okay, the rule in our house is you have to pretty consistently get between 8 and 10 hours of sleep. If this is going to be one of those really late nights, let me know ahead of time. But if it's starting to become a pattern, I would actually set an alarm. Not great for my sleep, let me tell you, but I would set an alarm at like 11 or 11:30 to go and check on my teen and make sure that they know now you're getting to that point where I might have to pull the car keys, because I'm not going to let you drive when you're sleep deprived, because I know the stats around accidents. Also, you're driving your younger sister to school, and I'm not going to be able to live with that, right? So there's a time where you say, okay, once in a while, every once in a while, you're studying for a final, whatever, you're doing a passion project, as Merv said, we're going to have some exceptions, and you try to make it up with a nap, or you try and make it up in other ways. But if it's becoming consistent, you may want to say, hey, we're going to set an alarm, and at a certain point, it's got to be lights out. I know some people turn the internet off at a certain time of night. That's another suggestion. But these are not easy, and every family has to do what's best for them and what makes sense for them. But I see it as really a physical health decision. Just like I wouldn't let my kid drive in a car without wearing a seatbelt or drive drunk, right? I'm not going to let them drive in a really drowsy state.
Yeah, I mean, because reality is, I mean, the goal, the hope, especially with our teens, is that they've built up enough agency to be able to like go to sleep when it's appropriate, wake up when it's appropriate. But the reality is, I mean, they're going through a lot. They're doing a lot at schools. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of activities they're in. So as a parent or a caregiver, it is up to us. I set multiple alarms in the morning just in case I know they snooze all the time. And so I then take it upon after I get my workout in, I jump upstairs. Are you guys awake yet? Okay, great. Okay, get moving, right? And at some point, I hope that it's just them doing it on their own and waking up and going. But you know, it's not necessarily the same day and age from my growing up where that was something that came up. I think eventually, though, there are signs of many other things that we've done that have been consistent, where it is very much I can see their agency at play. They've got the language and they understand, where they stand and how they want to be represented in platforms or tools that they use, and that's great. But things like sleep, they're still working on it. They want to stay up as long as possible. They don't want to miss a thing, right? And I get it, but if they want to be active and they want to be a part of the thing tomorrow, they need to get some rest.
Yeah. And the other thing, so there's a question here about when a teen has a test the next day, is it okay if they get reduced sleep? One of the things we absolutely know about sleep, and we're going to send you some resources, but there's a great book, Why We Sleep, by Matthew Walker. We actually are learning when we sleep. So when we sleep is when we're pruning all of the excess ideas that came through the day, and we're cementing what we've learned in school or what we've learned throughout the day. So it's actually, I know it sounds very counter, to what you would normally think, and to a teenager's logic, but you're actually going to do better on the test if you get enough sleep. And particularly the way we cement ideas is through sleep. 1 day, 2 day ahead of the test is actually when you should study. And if you are going to have to stay up late to study, it should happen 2 days before the test instead of the night before the test. So you can have them read the Matthew Walker book. You can have them read about sleep and learning and the importance of how that's cementing it. But we even did like a pretend little experiment in my house because my teens absolutely didn't believe me. So I said, fine, the next test, stay up as late as you want, cram, study, do all that stuff, see how you do, and then try it my way where you go to bed. Not scientific, the test was different. It's not how I would run an experiment in a lab, but it got through to them.
Oh, for sure. I mean, study skills is one thing, and sleep is another. And when they hit each other, because maybe, it's all focused on cramming to try and fit it in, and then that impacts sleep, it doesn't turn out the same the next morning,
Yeah.
right? So those are connected conversations, but they can also be separate conversations.
Another one is on late start times and playing sports in the dark. And we have a whole chapter in our overloaded and underprepared book on schools that went to late start times, and how that goes along with that is what you do with sports. It doesn't mean that you're pushing the whole day later. And unfortunately, if some schools are doing that, then we're talking about putting lights on the field and whatnot. But again, there are ways to implement this late start time, and we put on workshops for schools on ways to do it without necessarily pushing the whole day. So, and how can we help private schools enforce the California law on late start? Send them to us. We'll do our best to help explain sort of the rationale behind that, and really the utter importance of sleep. On this, I'll just do one more, which is the 6:45 AP computer science class. A lot of schools are sort of cheating or cutting corners with this late start because they are allowed to have a small percentage of kids on campus before the official start and still be in compliance with the law. We don't like that, but that's how they're doing it. Ideally, what I would say to the parent is that's where you come in as a family and talk about just how important sleep is, and why, even though you're very excited that your teen loves computer science or this advanced placement class, this 6:45 time is not something that you're going to want to do as a family for all of these reasons. And then I would try to find an alternative, lots of online options for advanced placement classes or honors classes, or ways for him or her or them to pursue their interest in computer science. But I would try to put my foot down or explain to them just how early they would have to go to bed to make that work.
Yeah. Denise, one of the other, I saw a few questions here around certain like apps or tools that we talked about earlier that might use to kind of to get them in that rest mode. One of the questions was like using the Calm app for their child. There are certain things that you can do. So if you're going to use an app that's meant to get them comfortable and relaxed, and if you can't do that as a way of just kind of getting prepared and then starting your procedures for sleep, but it's really more using it to actively fall asleep. Things that you might need to do then are, as a parent, once they're asleep, removing the devices for them while they're asleep. And there's an agreement, like recognizing that your teen knows when they fall asleep, you're coming in there removing it so that they can get quality sleep and not be disturbed by it, right? Or you can also shut things down at that point. You're shutting off the Wi-Fi, or you're actually going in if you've got the network where you or the connection to each other's devices, where you can shut down certain apps and tools and notifications after a certain point in time, and the only thing that's operating is the Calm app, or something that is helping to facilitate their restfulness. Then those are ways that you can potentially have it still be in the room, but find solutions so it doesn't aid in the additional challenges of sleep deprivation when those devices are actively setting things off.
Yeah, I think that answers the music question too. There's a question on here about listening to music, and there's nothing inherently bad about listening to music on a phone. It says in the shower or being in the car, whatever. Obviously, you want to watch the levels for the ears, right? But there's nothing, I know Common Sense Media and Challenge Success, we're not like phones are bad or devices are bad. They're it's just how you use them. Like they're a tool. So this idea of like, well, why is it bad if there's a laptop, anything that you can get on the internet shouldn't be in your room at night, both because of the potential for distraction, as Merv, said, and kids sneaking it, but also just literally there's been studies done where if you know it's there, you're thinking about it, whether you're on it or not. So that's the answer to that question about, why does it make a difference if it's in their backpack or if it's a laptop or whatnot.
Because the same's happening in schools. I mean, there was a question here around like, schools are, the reality is technology is a major part of instruction now, instruction and learning. And so they are in front of many screens, whether it's for, learning or for personal uses. But we also know, because prior, when kids were bringing their phones to schools, we also know that one of the big challenges was, they wanted to provide an equitable access to the online world when they couldn't provide them all the resources or all the devices. So many schools now are one-to-one and providing Chromebooks and laptops and whatever it might be. So they don't need them to have these devices. If anything, the devices are now, the phones now are actually, causing more disruption, because even if it's in their pocket, they're thinking about it, they're not focused. And so there's a bigger push now around even allowing them in schools, or that if they're going to be in school, they're in their backpack and they're not on their person, because just having them there, they're reacting to the vibration of a phone call or a text message or a notification or whatever those things might be. The same thing is happening in your bed, right? And so that's some of those big conversations. The bigger conversation, that was proposed here is like, what do we do because they're spending all that time? Like I said, or like what Denise mentioned, like we're not against the tech. The reality is tech has made our lives so much more efficient, effective, simpler. We're doing this on tech because so many of us can't get all into the same room at the same time, right? So it does provide so many great opportunities and innovation and solutions. But we do need to recognize, when do we take the pause? When do we stop? When is it hurting versus being helpful, right? And then how do you actually build that agency for your teen and for yourselves, so that you can think about your mental health, your well-being, your physical well-being, along with your mental well-being. And that means setting some things in place, creating, a protocol, something that you can follow and that you all agree upon, and something that can be consistent. Because when you're not consistent is when it all falls apart.
Yeah. And I would say everything that we're saying, by the way, for kids is also true for adults. We should not be on our phones right before bed. We should not have our phones in our bedroom, right? We should think about what we're doing, calming sleep hygiene to get better sleep. And we know for adults, this is absolutely connected to things like Alzheimer or cancer or diabetes, right? So the quality of your sleep is really important. Obviously, some of us have jobs, some of us have aging parents, so we got to keep our phones near us to get them or whatever. But there's all sorts of ways and things that you can do to your phone in terms of do not disturb and whatnot if you're in that situation. So I think it goes to what Murph said at the very beginning. Our kids are watching us as examples, and if we are actively trying to do things and we talk to them and educate them, I think it's going to go a long way to helping to motivate them. And someone said, well, when they get to college, you're not gonna be able to do that. I will tell you that, again, in my house, right before college, so senior year, they earned the privilege of having devices in the bedroom as a practice for what it would be like in college, to see, was their prefrontal cortex fully developed enough at that moment to be able to turn off devices and learn to get their sleep. And with some of my children, we had to make some adjustments because they weren't quite ready to earn that privilege yet, because we were seeing that they weren't able to do that. But yeah, there is this transition to college where they're not going to be able, the parents are not going to be able to take that phone away. Again, it goes to what Merv was saying, educate them to make the good choices and have that kind of self-control.
Yeah, 100%. I think just actually re-reviewing some of the questions and just some of like, how do we do this? How do we get them to see the value in it? I mean, really, I'm going to reiterate it, it's that consistency, because it's the consistency and it's the recognition that these should not be conversations that live in a silo of only when you have a problem with the way that they're using tech or the way that the phones are playing a role in their lives. You should be talking about their experiences on social media, their experiences with their phone. Do they feel, what pressure do they feel like having it next to them? Why do they feel? And it's not about trying to catch them on something or say, I knew that's why you were doing it. It's really about trying to understand, why do they feel more secure when they have it with them? What do they feel like they're going to miss out on? Or what do they feel like they need help or support on, so they don't, as a notification, just so don't miss anything, and then come up with other solutions. If you're addressing these conversations as these are just part of the conversations we have daily, and we'll talk about it not only when there's a problem, but really to find daily solutions and how we navigate these things together, then it's a lot easier for them to actually recognize when, what, I had a way better sleep last night because of that, versus how am I going to stick it to dad in the morning because he pissed me off last night when he took it away. That's what they're focused on. And it's oftentimes because all I do when I talk to you about these things is punitive. It's only because I've got a problem. And so these need to be a natural part of the kinds of conversations we engage with every day, because it's a part of the world that we live in now. It's part of the world that they thrive in. So really understanding kind of where they're coming from, why they feel the need, and then help to find solutions to support them and yourself through it.
Absolutely. And I'm mindful of the time, and so we want to get everyone out here on time. I've just got a few slides as we wrap this up. This is videotaped. You can show this to your teen when this comes out. Both Common Sense Media and Challenge Success are working with schools. That was one of the things that just flew by in the chat, to help them think about how they incorporate this kind of education. We have a mnemonic aid, if it helps you, at Challenge Success, called PDF, which stands for playtime, downtime, and family time. And these are research-based protective factors for kids. And you can use your phone for playtime. You've got to put your phone away to really think about how you're using downtime and sleep as part of that downtime. And family time, again, you can have wonderful device time with families and have a lot of fun watching TV or YouTube videos. It's used to talk to grandma, etc. But it can also be used to keep people from having family time. So we don't want that. So it's not one thing is good or bad, but we absolutely want you to remember PDF, playtime, downtime, family time, as a protective factor for kids. We have some upcoming events. If you liked this, we have a healthier approach to college admissions on September 20th. You can sign up on our website for that. We're going to be talking about how to get that stress out. I saw somewhere in the chat, someone said, well, gosh, if there wasn't all this pressure for college, then they wouldn't feel the pressure to get the homework done and get the grades, which is keeping them up. So yes, we're here to help with all of that. Our conferences are now open both on the East Coast and West Coast for individual educators who want to come and sign up and learn more, like workshops like this. And hold the date, February 7th, we have a winter fundraiser with Lisa D'Amour, who is amazing and has written wonderful books on adolescence, and is the one who said the metaphor about sleep as sort of the magic pill. Lots of ways to stay engaged with us. I know Merv, Common Sense Media also has ways for parents to stay engaged. Do you have any things that you want to share before we close out here?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I would say one of the easiest ways, just visit commonsense.org, follow one of our newsletters if you're an educator, the educator newsletter, or a parent. It's a great way just to kind of stay on top of some of the big issues or trends that might be happening kind of in the zeitgeist of all the issues that we hear about. And we want to make sure that we can create really easy to-go tools and tips to make it easy. We say make it easy. In practice, it's always going to be a little more challenging because, obviously you know your family better than I ever will. But we hope it can provide some points to start. I would say also, we might end up having a part 2 here because we've got a new research piece that's coming out at the end of this month that is around teens and smartphones, and there will be a little bit more in there about how they report their sleep is going. So more to come at the end of this month in terms of research. So feel free to follow Common Sense and be on top of those updates through the newsletters.
Fabulous. Thank you all for joining us. Obviously you care very much about your children, given that, I mean, we had so many people sign up for this workshop. It's definitely something that we're all dealing with. It's not easy. We didn't have to deal with it when we were growing up, right? So we don't have really good models, and that's why both Common Sense Media and Challenge Success are here to help you and serve as resources during this difficult time. And depending on where you are in the world right now, it might be time for you to go and put your kids to bed.
Get some rest.
All right. Thank you so much. We appreciate you, and have a good night.
Thanks, everyone.